the scientists always say that we didn't evolve from primates, but we share a common ancestor, because clearly they was first and their evolution was stopped and it was changed. And then they began to create us. It's one of the weirdest things, that you look at when you see this whole thing. It's one of the things that had me puzzled for a while. I had to really dig into it and pull it out and say, you know what, that has to be what happened. But the proof is right there when you look at the fact that, their genetics, their code was altered and we have no clue. Everything you're going to see when I'm getting into this stuff is showing you tampering. They're not saying, and they're clear on this, they're not saying that it was a mutation or something happened in nature. They're saying, I don't know. Every time you go and you look, I don't know. They say it clear. We don't know what happened, because you can't put it on mutation. This is why I stick with the whole mutation from black to white, because that's clear. We can prove that, which Dr. Keith Chang did. We can find the mutation. In these cases, they don't know what happened. Something was done to alter that path and to change them into what we see today. So now let's go to the garden. Let's look at Genesis 3:14. It says here, and the Lord God said unto the serpent, because thou done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and thus shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Now, we probably read that 1,000 times. A lot of people read that verse and we just read it, and it's subtle clues, in the Bible to always talk about. You got to pay attention to the wording and how they say things. So when it's talking about this serpent that's supposed to be, in the garden, it says, cursed him on his belly. Meaning what? If it's a snake, we assume it's already on its belly, right? It's a serpent. It's supposed to already be on its belly. But he said, no, I curse you on your belly. Meaning what? It couldn't have been a snake in the garden. See, these depictions, they make these depictions to fool you. Plain and simple. It wasn't a serpent in the garden. It was a dragon in the garden. And when you pay attention to so many different things, we won't get into this. It's clear as day what they're trying to say and what they're trying to allude to with the snake being the reptilian. It's a dragon in the garden, a serpent dragon, not a serpent, which is why when he say, I'm going to curse you on your belly, meaning those arms, it's going to be gone that we see with these serpent dragons. Now that always had us confused anyway, because the serpent speaking and snakes don't talk today. Now we don't know what these dragons were, what they were able to do when they existed. But when you go through the mythologies and the stories, they could talk. It was the weirdest thing. They can talk. And, it's something that you can't ignore. Now, when you look at in the Bible, them basically giving us dragons in the Bible, which we'll get into this. You have to really pay attention to what it's talking about. So it says here, Isaiah 27:1, in that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. So it's giving you that comparison to serpent dragons. So now we go to Job 41. Remember, in Job 41, you have the story where God is basically, cussing out Job for talking back to him. He's basically saying like, how you talking back to me? You don't got no fear of me, but you scared of all these beasts on the planet and all these tigers and dragons or what have you, and these things that he named in the story. He's saying you scared of these things, but how you ain't scared of me? And I'm the one who made them. So here in Job 41, it's saying, canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? So it's saying, can you do this stuff? Can you do this with the Leviathan? The Leviathan is big beast. You won't do this one. You can't catch it with a hook. You can't do this because, you're scared of it. It'll kill you. But, you take that type of direction with Leviathan, but yet, you talk back to me and I created it. Basically what God's saying. So the most important part we skip down here. Let's go to 19 and 22. It says, Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. Sounds like a fire-breathing dragon to me, and it's talking about the Leviathan here, talking about the serpent dragon. So you get this comparison again of the serpent and the dragon. So again, when it's talking about serpents, when you understand, even when you take the words back, to Hebrew, Greek, or what have you, it's going to give you serpent. But when you understand what these serpents was called back then, they were referring to them as serpents, the serpent dragons. Interchangeable, same thing, any way you want to look at it. But we can just go straight. Revelations 12, verse 9, it says, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." So again, you see it in the Bible where they're referring to the serpent as a dragon. It's too many references, too many stories around the world that we see where it's talking about dragons. As a matter of fact, we go into Kentucky, where they have the Creation Museum. They have the Creation Museum of Kentucky. It's ran by Christians, but they have a dragon exhibition there, a whole exhibit on dragons. So, clearly the Christians acknowledge the fact that, the Bible's talking about dragons. It's talking about dinosaurs when it's talking about the behemoth. When you read again in Job, it's talking about the behemoth, talking about, these huge dinosaurs. Now, in Job, it's talking about, the tail being like a cedar tree, which is huge. So a lot of people think they're talking about hippopotamus, but it's talking about dinosaurs and a lot of different references in the Bible. And we know they were called dragons. So, you have that whole reference with the serpent dragon. We look at China. We look at the serpent dragon in China and all the mythology that surrounds that. You look at the Chinese zodiac. Everything on that zodiac is real. You have a dragon there as well. So it's no reason for us to believe that dragon is not real as well, or wasn't real at some point. So we got to look at this stuff. We go down to, look at the Aztecs and the feathered serpent. We talked about how you had this whole, common ancestor between birds, reptilians, and mammals. Well, if you have feathers evolving from scales, the perfect example of that is with the feathered serpent we see down in with the Mayans and the Aztecs down in Mexico. You have Quetzalcoatl when you see the depictions of the feathered serpent. We see a feathered serpent in so many different places, giving you that whole connection still as a serpent dragon. Again, in ancient Kemet, you have the whole connection with Wajet Nekbet. You have a serpent and a bird, giving you that connection. The same thing I was talking about before with the brain. And you have, as I said, the Great Pyramid representing the brain, the lower brain, the woman chamber, the queen's chamber in the Great Pyramid, where you have it pointing to Draco, the Draco constellation. Again, serpent, dragon. It's everywhere. Everywhere you look, you see these depictions, you see these comparisons, and them showing serpent dragons. Draco is Latin for draconian, meaning serpent dragon. Even the Greeks have dracontos. Dracontos, which is serpent, giant, sea fish. In ancient mythology, ancient Egyptian mythology, you have Apophis, which, remember, Apophis is the enemy of Ra. You see in many depictions, Apophis is a serpent. Apophis attacking the solar boat, which I think is a reference to them when they astro traveling, them, obviously running into some kind of reptilian interference. You see many depictions of even Set battling, Apophis, and this whole reference to astral travel and, what we would think traveling through space, in the spiritual body, and them having to do battle with serpents or the reptilians. And it's crazy. Remember, in the story, Ra turns into the cat and kills Apophis. And you see in the depiction, Apophis, the serpent by that tree. All these connections we see is stuff that you got to look at, and you got to understand all this stuff is here to give us this reference that we can't ignore. The ancient Egyptians also talked about dragons in the pyramid text. A lot of people don't know about that. You had Denwen. It says in the pyramid text, Denwen was an Egyptian serpent deity known from the time of the Old Kingdom. The Egyptians shunned him because he posed a threat to all deities. So powerful was his dragon-like abilities. Denwen possessed power over fire, and he could generate a fiery conflagration so powerful that it would destroy even the gods. The dragon attempted this feat, but he failed to slaughter the deities because the spirit of the deceased king thwarted his attack. And we know we have with the Sumerians, the great dragon here. The Babylonians worship Baal and Marduk. And we also have to look at the Nagas, serpents. To me, we look at the Nagas, they probably would represent, what these beings, this common ancestor could have possibly looked like. Seeing these depictions of these half man, half serpent Nagas, these serpents that's everywhere. We see them worshipped in statues and figurines all over the place. It's something that we got to look at and definitely, put that question in our head, like, why half human, half serpent? Is it trying to tell us something? Is it trying to, depict a morphing from them being serpents, to humans? And it's one of the things I always looked at, like, if we go back to this evolution, and if we had this common ancestor that was probably, clearly reptilian, is this what it's trying to tell us? Was the evolution process, seen by many as looking this way, as half man, half serpent? We know in Greek mythology, you got the Gorgons. Remember, the Gorgons, same thing, half serpent, half human, or half like man looking. Remember, Medusa, it's a Gorgon. It had, serpent hair. So the mythology, the stories is everywhere. I talked about before about Maria Gambudis. Now, Maria Gambudis is the person who, her research is very important, and she found some of the oldest figurines ever, plain and simple. She talked about the matrilineal society, a society of just women, how women was here first before anybody else. And the figurines she found, a lot of them, when you take a look at them, it almost looks exactly, like what we're talking about here. About, you have this half serpent looking body and the rest is like human, like it's almost as if it's morphing into something. And just like the Egyptian noses was cut off, a lot of people believe that the arms and the heads was cut off on a lot of these figurines to hide, what they probably look like, or to hide the human features. But you can see in a lot of the figurines, it's showing as if, you got the serpent lower half, but it looked like it's starting to split and turn into legs a little bit. But she talked about the whole society of the women who worship these serpent deities. This is from her book. Snakes dwell both in water and in the ground. They hibernate in the earth's body during the winter, and they return in the spring. Further, their periodic molting reinforced their role as symbols of renewal. Snakes were thus thought to bring life in spring. They were also thought to embody deceased ancestors. The classic image of the snake goddess portrays her sitting yoga-like or squatting with snake-shaped limbs. Her head appears either human, snake-like, or masked and perhaps crowned. Snake heads appear with round eyes and a long mouth on vase rims or handles. Horned snake heads were composed in relief on vases. As with the bird goddess, people associated specific symbols with the snake goddess. The snake coil, spiral, zigzag, or wavy lines imitating the snake's movement. Other symbols resemble dotted or diamond bands imitating the snake's skin. A snake's coil often occupies the center position on painted or engraved dishes. Votive tablets or megalithic tombs. Snakes crawl or zigzag of vases' sides or handles from the Neolithic through the Bronze Age and beyond. This depiction, even looks as if, you have snake legs, as if it's separating, as if it was serpent-like at first and it's just separated into legs. It's crazy when you see it.